A very good afternoon, and thanks for clicking on to the Saturday edition of Vogan's European Outlook. Before we get into the video, of course, please like, share, and subscribe. There is a world of content available on both Facebook as well as on my Twitter page, and as well as that, of course, on markvoganweather.com. The April Outlook is available. You can also look and see what the weekend that we're now in the midst of was what the forecast was, of course. So do check out markvoganweather.com. Follow me on Facebook and indeed Twitter for regular weather updates. And of course, coming up tomorrow is the global weather and climate report, looking at tornadoes, snow, and indeed, of course, all the extremes that have went on across the planet over the last 7 days. Speaking of the last 7 days, this is the 2-meter temperature anomaly for Europe for the first week of April, and interestingly enough, a very chilly Central Europe, as you can see here. Southeastern portions of the UK, so the bulk of England and Wales below average actually, and indeed slightly warmer than average across the Scotland, particularly so northwest Scotland, and indeed Ireland and Northern Ireland as well. But some of those anomalies for the first week through southern Poland, parts of Austria, and indeed into the southeast portion of the continent around Bosnia-Herzegovina, Serbia, Slovakia, western portions of Romania. Very, very chilly for the first week of the month. So, high pressure, of course, in control at the moment. We're seeing these big swings between sub-freezing mornings, where you're having to go out and scrape your car if you're up early enough before the sun gets to work on the temperature. But of course, by the time we reach the middle portion of the morning, temperatures are back up into double figures, of course. So this is the classic time of the year where you've got the big swing, the diurnal swing between morning and afternoon, of course. And it's classic when you've got an area of high pressure in control. What we are going to see is we're going to start to see the winds from the south start to pick up as this area of low pressure starts to push. We've got one front, our boundary, as you can see here, just to the west of the British Isles at 1800 today. But what happens is that becomes fizzled out by the area of high pressure that is driving the weather through the first half of the Easter weekend. And then it's as that we progress through the course of tomorrow, we notice here that as that area of high pressure just slightly nudges far enough away that it allows enough decrease in the pressure field over the UK to see a little bit more eastward progress of this frontal system. That is going to be the game changer later in the day tomorrow. So Easter Sunday and then into Easter Monday, we're going to see wind and rain return. Not necessarily a big drop in temperature, but we are going to see a decrease in temperature by a couple of degrees pretty much everywhere during the course of Monday. And then we're in this kind of rash of showers. But you notice here that the pressure drops quite significantly with this low. Because it's getting bumped against this area of high pressure, it's then forcing the air to pile up and bundle. Therefore, we see the central pressure dropping. So as you can see here, this is off the GFS chart. You can see by the time we reach 1800 tomorrow, you can start to see, of course, it's already a wet day, probably quite windy coming in from a west-southwest direction across the Republic and Northern Ireland, and then western fringes of England, Wales and Scotland. We're seeing that rain band moving in. So it's as we progress through the evening tomorrow, that's when we start to see the conditions changing quite significantly. But a sunny day for the majority, and indeed a south wind. We are going to see the warmest temperatures of the entire weekend, I think, during Easter Sunday. And of course, you can refer to my Easter weekend forecast for the details. So once that main frontal system moves through, we're in that kind of showery westerly regime. And then it's actually all eyes on this little feature right here forming on a pretty strong jet stream, actually. The jet stream is part of the reason why we're seeing this area of high pressure kind of start to kind of get pushed eastwards, northeastwards, and indeed that is then kind of changing the overall pattern. We're seeing the dynamics in place over the eastern half of the United States, where we're seeing very, very warm temperatures over the eastern US, but we are also seeing a strong jet stream crossing the Atlantic, and that is essentially changing the pattern across the west of Europe. But it's as this feature then rides that strong jet stream. Notice it's reasonably far south, actually, this area of low pressure. Quite a squeeze in the temperature gradient. If we look at the 850s here, you can see that we do have quite a difference in the temperature. So that is, of course, driving the very strong jet stream. Look at the cold air that's coming out of the Baffin Straits, eastern portions of Canada, where we've seen temperatures nearly minus 40, by the way, in parts of northern Quebec in recent days. That, of course, is getting pulled out over a warmer than average Atlantic Ocean. So, of course, we're not necessarily going to see a significant shot of cold as this air mass crosses those relatively warm waters compared to average. We're going to see the air mass moderate significantly. But notice we do have some showers, snow showers at that, seen by the model. But it's as this area of low pressure approaches Ireland and the British Isles, it deepens significantly. And folks, I wouldn't be entirely surprised if this becomes a named storm. Look at the pressure now dropped. It centred just below Ireland at 988, then 982, 974, then 972, and it looks as if it's centred over the north of England here. This would bring a widespread gale situation, disruption likely to travel. We may even see hill snow and the potential for slight disruption over the highest road routes, possibly the M62, M66, the A66, should I say, A69 and whatnot, and even the M74. Because if we look at the 850 temperatures here, so this is a pulling in some fairly cold air, as you can see here, and what that's going to do is it's going to enhance instability, because of course we've got a strong sun at this time of the year, and indeed with relatively cold air in the mid and upper levels of the atmosphere, that forces a greater upward motion. The lapse rate is what you call it, when the air is forced to accelerate in a vertical column, when you've got that bigger temperature differential between the surface and the mid levels of the atmosphere. So therefore you could see some very lively weather, hail, very, very heavy rainfall bursts. We could see even the potential for even some funnel clouds, for example, with a lot of turning and twisting in the atmosphere. So this could be a very interesting scenario, actually, as we go towards the period here. Let's have a look at the snow depth chart, actually, off the model and see if it's showing anything. This is actually, I've not actually looked at this, so I don't actually know what the model is suggesting. But let's look at the GFS and see if it does print out any snow over higher ground here. So, of course, into Tuesday, is it showing? It's showing something. You can see here, eastern portions of Northern Ireland. Of course, you have to assume that it would only be in the air as opposed to accumulating, especially during the daytime. Very difficult to get accumulating snow at this time of the year, but it does happen, and we have seen that, of course, in the past. Snow in April is not entirely unusual, and of course, we have to remember it's statistically more likely to get a white Easter as opposed to a white Christmas. Not that we're going to see that this year, of course, with temperatures widely into the teens tomorrow. But that's quite interesting, actually, to see that, as you can see here. Let's have a look at the wind situation and see what that is showing, because I've been quite intrigued to see how strong the winds are projected to be with this feature. So we'll play it through the loop. Of course, we've got some fairly brisk southerly winds, and this is actually quite a good representation. So kind of south to southwesterly winds. I would say parts of the north coast of Wales, the Murray Coast, northern portions of Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland, especially up towards the north coast. Could be seeing temperatures into the high teens with this kind of situation, where you've got sunshine, wind, and of course the Föhn effect enhances the warming in some areas of the country. Fairly typical, of course, this time of the year. And there's that area of low pressure, and you can see here that it is suggesting the strongest winds, of course, as most of the time we've got it on the southern flank of the low, and certainly the latest GFS run has this low crossing the north of England, and therefore we've got the strongest winds. Some very strong gusty winds between Manchester, Leeds, down towards Birmingham, of course Wales, southwest England, probably the Scilly Isles would see some of the strongest wind gusts from this situation, possibly even Needles Point on the Isle of Wight, of course. Very, very susceptible site to very strong winds, of course. Let's have a look at the ECMWF and see what that's suggesting. So let's go back to the overview chart. Of course, there's our frontal system. kind of just completely dissipating in that high pressure field. Then the winds start to increase from the south, so therefore we're going to see the warmest temperatures during the course of tomorrow. And you can see here that it's really Northern Ireland gets in, as well as the Republic gets in on the wet conditions. We're probably going to see a spell of persistent rain for an hour or two, and then it becomes more showery and blustery, of course, in the wake of that main boundary. And then it seems to be the majority of the bulk of rain actually is more across the north, not exclusively, of course. Everywhere's going to see shower activity with this situation here, and see that area of low pressure actually moving across. We could see some very intense showers, as you can see here by the ECMWF, during the course of Monday. We've got, of course, all that nice warming taking place, and of course the instability within the atmosphere, cool aloft, means we're going to see the development of some very lively showers indeed. And you notice here that the model is even printing out some sleetiness, possibly snow mixed in, of course. As you get that downdraft, that cell that develops, you then, with that rapid fall of moisture through the column, you cool it, and therefore you can see the temperature go from like 15 Celsius down to like 6, 7 Celsius in the space of a matter of minutes when you're underneath that cell of heavy precip. So a lot of dynamics in place, and like I say, some funnel clouds is possible with this type of scenario as well. And then here comes that main feature of the ECMWF, and you can see here that it is quite different. You notice here, completely different actually to the GFS, where it is nowhere near as deep. And this is the problem that we have in forecasting, when it could be a case of, one model is printing out, like, a named storm, another model might have hardly anything. But notice here that we've got plenty of shower activity, that's for sure, during the course of mid-Wednesday. And some fairly chilly air in place as well. If we look at the 850 temperatures, you can see here, more interesting if I can get the right one. So yeah, relatively cool aloft, but that enhances the April showers, if you will, overall. So that's it for today. We will look at, of course, the global weather situation in tomorrow's video, so stay tuned for that. Please like, share, and subscribe. As I always say, I do appreciate your support, and I'll hopefully see you again tomorrow with more. Bye for now.